Hey, just so everybody knows, the mic is live, so the comments are being recorded.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you, Tom.
All right. Go ahead and say hi. I'm going to use this here. You can hear me? You say something, Lucy? For
Yes,
me,
I can
please?
hear you, Tom.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And using my
I can hear you
headset.
also too, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Likewise, Councilman Lewis.
Thank you. There we go. Get my headset here. Smoke gave me a little case of sore throat last week. All right, do we have everybody on board?
Yes, I think everybody's here. Let me just double check. Yes, you're set.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 1st, 2021 City Council meeting. There we go. We are still in virtual mode, so public comments will be taken either through email, through the regular mail, or through the city water bill drop box. Email is cityclerk@lospanas.org, and the drop box and mail is 520 J Street, Los Panas, California, 93635. And your comments can have up to 250 words and will be read at the proper time in the meeting. And at this point, we would ask Pastor Keith Johnson from New Canaan Missionary Baptist Church to deliver the invocation. Mr.
Johnson,
Pastor,
can you
you're
unmute
muted.
your mic, please?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Father God, we thank you today, this afternoon. We thank you, Lord, for your grace and mercy. We thank you for this city of Los Banos. We thank you, Lord, for this city council meeting. And Lord, we pray that the decisions that we will make, Lord, would bless this city and bless the people that live in this city. We ask that you would give us good insight, oh God, and Father, that you would bless us tremendously. We give you all praise, we give you glory, and we give you honor. Bless our leadership in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Pastor.
God bless you.
Thank you. Now, I will call the meeting to order at, let me check my clock here. I show 6:04 p.m. And then we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Acting Police Chief Hedden.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chief. Roll call, Ms. Maloney.
Jones,
Present.
Lambert,
Here.
Lewis,
Here.
Lamas,
Here.
Maria.
Here, we have a quorum. We'll move on to the consideration of approval of agenda. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, excuse me, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor, Yamas here. I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, and a second by Councilmember Yamas to approve the agenda as submitted. Roll call, Ms. Maloney.
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Lamas,
Yes.
Maria.
Yes, motion carried. Agenda has been approved. Item 5, public forum. Members of the public may address the City Council on any item of public interest that is within the jurisdiction of the City Council. This includes agenda and non-agenda items. No action will be taken on non-agenda items. Speakers may submit their comments by submitting a written statement limited to 250 words or less by dropping it off in the utility payment box at City Hall, 520 J Street, by mail or by email at cityclerk@lospanas.org. Comments received will be read into the record during the City Council meeting. Ms. Maloney, do we have any comments?
I've received 2 comments. One I'll read during public forum,
Okay.
and one is related to police negotiations. So I don't know where you want me to read that. Right now or right before we go into closed session?
Let's go ahead and read it now, since closed session is all done internally. So let's go ahead and read both of them now, please, if you would.
Okay, so the first one I received is from Joe Hine, Parks and Recreation Manager. Good evening, City Council and Los Banos community. I would like to invite the public to a community meeting we are hosting at the Community Center from 6 to 7 p.m. on September 8th for input on improvements at Colorado Ballpark. The input is a vital piece to an application the City of Los Banos will be submitting for the Rural Recreation and Tourism Grant through the State of California Parks and Recreation Department. The grant is funded by Prop 68 and accepts requests up to $3 million in improvements. Colorado Ballpark is one of Los Banos' oldest and most important parks in Los Banos, hosting Little League, a skate park, and tennis courts. The grant is intended to offer benefits for physical activity, cultural enrichment, environmental education, economic gain, and the prevention of the displacement of residents. Improvements include the renovation and addition of new recreation features. The grant is due November 5th, 2021. Again, the public meeting is from 6 to 7 p.m. at the Los Banos Community Center on September 8th. If you would like to provide your comments electronically, please email parksandrecreation@losbanos.org. Great. And the second comment is from Macy Saab. We need police officers who are invested in our community to stay in our community. Seasoned officers have street knowledge of the problems this city has. Losing experienced officers to other agencies because they are not compensated justly is a huge loss for the Los Banos community, considering the crime spike we have seen in the last year. What plan does the city have to deal with the problem of experienced police officers leaving our city for higher paying agencies? Why can't the city offer better wages to officers despite having a financial surplus after this last fiscal year and despite all the new construction happening in town? And those are the 2 comments I have received.
Thank you very much. So we will now close the public forum and go on to the consideration of approval of consent agenda. Consent agenda items are considered to be routine and will be voted on in one motion unless removed from the consent agenda by a city council member. Ms. Malady, please read the items tonight on our consent.
The items on the consent agenda are as follows. Warrant numbers 228459 through 228665 in the amount of $692,501.60. Minutes for the August 18th, 2021 City Council meeting. Minutes for the August 24th, 2021 Special City Council meeting. City Council Resolution number 6403, authorizing that the acting city manager execute the congestion mitigation air quality assurance of timely project delivery form for the City of Los Banos Pioneer Road widening, Pioneer Road / Ortegalita Road signalization project. And the items are to be approved as submitted.
Thank you, Ms. Malady. I'll go through council if they want any items pulled, and let us know if you want to pull for discussion or separate vote. Mr. Jones?
No items, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
No items, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item D for discussion.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And Mr. Yamas?
No items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yamas. So we'll go first to item D for the discussion. And for that, we go to Interim Public Works Director, Bowersox.
Good evening, Mayor Faria, council members. The item I have before you is, as read by the clerk, it's a recommendation for the city council to adopt a resolution to authorize the city manager to execute the CMAQ Assurance of Timely Project Delivery form. This is required as part of the grant application that we submitted. And so the project that has been selected is the Ortigalita Signalization Project, as recommended by our consultant, Mark Thomas and Company. So I'm here for any questions you might have.
Very good. Ms. Lewis?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. You know, in looking at this project, first of all, it's a resolution, and secondly, it's quite a bit of information, I think, on here that I think needs to be more thoroughly discussed with the council rather than burying it in a consent agenda. So with that in mind, you know, I'm looking at here, there are quite a bit of things that are in the first paragraph of this about 4 lanes, median installation, right turn pockets, and on and on and on. I would just like to have staff be prepared more to invest time in explaining, you know, this particular portion of the project to the council. And with that, I would like this to be pulled and put on the next agenda coming up as a public hearing rather than a consent agenda item.
Let's see. This, we could put it on as a regular item. I don't know whether it would be a public hearing item. I'll refer to staff who'd like to take that, whether we need a public hearing for something like this.
Well, I mean, if it doesn't require a public hearing, that's fine, but I do think we need to invest more time with council and explaining this and going over this. It's a major project, and I would like to see more information with all the numbers and pages here of things that I don't understand. I would like to have staff explain this better to me.
So what you'd like to see is continue this item and then bring
Yes.
it on as a regular consent agenda item on the
Yes.
next council meeting, correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I'll take that as a motion, and and if you'd like me to take that as a motion, Ms. Lewis, I will, and ask for a second.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like you to take that as a motion.
Okay. So we have a motion to continue item 6D until the next council meeting and bring it on as a regular item. Do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor,
Okay, Yamas, I got you first. All right. So I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and a second by Councilmember Yamas to continue item 6D, and bring it at the next city council meeting as a regular item rather than on the consent agenda. Roll call, please. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Faria.
Yes. Motion carried unanimously. That item will be continued. Now, Ms. Lewis, would you like to make the motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with items A, B, C as submitted.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, second by Councilmember Lambert to approve the consent agenda items A, B, and C. Roll call, Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Lamas,
Yes.
Faria.
Yes, motion carried unanimous. Now we will move to item 7. Thank you, staff, for the information in that item. Item 7, consideration of confirming the city's interest in accepting the proposed transfer of 2 parcels from the Los Banos Designated Local Authority as successor agency to the Los Banos Redevelopment Agency, the former Los Banos Redevelopment Agency, to the city of Los Banos. This is a 0.91 acre parcel located on the northwest corner of West H Street and 2nd Street. Assessor's parcel number 025-053-002. And a 2.02 acre parcel that runs along the north side of H Street between 4th Street and 2nd Street. Assessor's parcel number 025-054-006. For that, we'll go to City Attorney, Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. On tonight's agenda, number 7 is a presentation by the designated local authority. We all know them as the DLA. Mark Persico is with us tonight, representative for the DLA, as well as Dave Norman, an engineer with Provost and Pritchard. Essentially, the presentation tonight is to gauge the city's interest in obtaining 2 additional properties that were not in the original bunch of properties that are now subject to our compensation agreement. One of the properties fronts on H Street between 4th and 2nd, I believe. And the other property is on 2nd Street on a little tip there on the western portion between H and 2nd. These properties were not part of the original bundle of properties that were offered to the city, and DLA is now interested in gauging your interest in whether or not we would be interested in obtaining title to those properties. There are some issues that need to be resolved with those properties beforehand, similar issues to the other rail trail properties, and before they expend the resources, time, and effort to do that, they wanted to make a presentation tonight and just gauge the temperature of the city council as to whether or not there was any interest in these 2 additional properties. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark Persico and Dave Norman.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Mark Persico. I'm staff to the designated local authority and senior advisor to Cosmont and Associates. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I believe that Sonia is going to be running that. Is that correct?
Let me see if I can show that to you. I'm here, so.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Is that showing?
It is not, no.
Okay.
If it's not possible to run it, the PowerPoint was also included in the staff report. So if it's at the council's pleasure, I can just kind of talk through the presentation.
Yeah, I'm trying to share it, but it won't share my screen for some reason. And I don't know why. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'll keep
Mark,
trying.
do you have it up on your computer? Because Lucy, you could give him permission to share his screen.
Okay.
If you click in the little corner, you should be able to give him permission, and then he can share his screen if you can't get yours to work.
I gave you permission, Mark. Can you share yours?
Okay. Yes, let me open up the presentation. Okay. Great. Can everybody see that?
No, No, we're beyond technical difficulties today, apparently. Lucy, can you make me co-host, please? So I could try to fix something.
All right, how's that?
Now we've got it.
Great.
There you go.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Mayor and council members. I'll go through a quick presentation and be able to answer any questions that anybody might have. So as the mayor read, this is seeking council direction for the transfer of properties from the designated local authority to the city. And as the city attorney pointed out, these have not previously been discussed by the city. Here's a map. This map is slightly different from the map that was in the presentation. There are two parcels, as the city attorney pointed out, both which front on 8th Street, but they are separated by both 2nd Street. 2nd Street separates parcel 2 from parcel 1, and then parcel 1 actually has 2 separate assessor parcel numbers, which is separated by a street easement, but it's an unimproved roadway. So parcel 1 is approximately 2 acres. It's 100 feet deep and about 880 feet long. Would be ideal for economic development purposes for the city if the city did choose to accept this property. And I know the city attorney did a very detailed presentation back on August 18th when the city accepted the transfer of 2 properties. So this is very similar to that. Parcel 1 has some improvements on it. Parcel 1B is currently improved with a parking lot and a raised deck. It's part of an old railroad siding. The tracks themselves aren't there, but the platform is. And then parcel 1A is half improved and half dirt. So the redevelopment ended in 2012, February 1st of 2012, and the designated local authority was appointed to wind down the activities of the redevelopment agency. The 2 biggest items that we've been engaged in have been property remediation and property disposition. Again, Bill went through a very detailed presentation, I know, a couple of weeks ago for the city council. There's 3 major phases to remediation. The first is site assessment, the second is soils testing, and then the third is site characterization and remediation. That's where the actual cleanup is done. The designated local authority hired Provost Pritchard in 2013 because they've got a strong track record of success, and they'd also done some work previously for the city of Los Banos. What we are hoping to do on these properties, I'll now talk about the parcels. The parcels 1A and 1B are actually a little over 1 acre. It's about 1.1 acre in size. And what we are proposing to do, again, based upon the recommendation of Provost Pritchard, is to leave the property as is and record a land use covenant. While there is some contamination on the property and it wouldn't be available to be used as residential uses, the property is safe to be used for both commercial and industrial uses. So our recommendation would be to leave the property as is and record a land use covenant. It would all have to be reviewed and approved by the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is the state agency responsible for all cleanup. And pending their issuance of a no further action letter, we would propose to transfer this property to the city. Parcel 2, Again, it's a little over 2 acres. This has been vacant since about 2006, previously used as a lumber yard. There is some additional remediation work that needs to be done on this property. There are 7 areas which exceed the thresholds for contamination. Those areas would be remediated. Again, land use covenant would be recorded on the property. And then if a no further action letter was issued by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, we would propose to transfer this property to the city as well. I think all of these
Mark,
yes.
Mark, could you go to the map and show the second parcel on that map?
Yes.
There you go.
So you can see the pointer here. This is the larger parcel in 2 acres. This property, while it has 2 assessors' parcel numbers, is functionally a single property. This is where the raised siding is, the raised platform. This is a paved lot. The paving comes up to about here on the property, and then this is just bare soil, bare dirt.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that parcel number 2 is fronts on H Street, and currently the rest of that parcel, I believe, is towards the middle of that block, and that would be a piece that the city will be accepting.
Right.
And actually last week, the city accepted that flag piece there to the, I guess it would be the southwest corner. So that frontage piece in yellow there would complete that entire block for the city if the city council was interested in accepting that frontage piece, parcel 2. That's all I wanted to point out.
Great. So I think I can conclude here on this slide. Again, our desire tonight is to be able to answer questions that council members might have, proceed with the remediation. If we did get clearance from the Regional Water Quality Control Board and no further action letter, there would be a second action that the city council would take to actually formally accept the properties from and they would then transfer from the DLA to city ownership. And that concludes my presentation. Again, Dave Norman is here. He is the technical expert who could answer any questions that council members might have.
Thank you, Mr. Persico. I'll go ahead and go through council and see if council has any questions or comments. Mr. Jones?
No questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
There's no questions here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Ms. Lewis?
Well, I do have some questions, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure who would be answering this, but I'm going to start off. These now 3 parcels, or parcel A and B of 1 parcel, there are 3 different phases that they have to go through. Can someone tell me at what phase we're in right now? Are we in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3? Exactly where are we?
I think at this point I would defer to Dave Norman, and he can discuss that in better detail than I could.
Okay. And let me just look at my notes here right quickly. These parcels are not any parcels that the city's purchasing that we have to divide money up with other government agencies. Is it, Mr. Vaughn?
No, that's not correct. If the city were interested in obtaining these parcels, it would go, once the cleanup was completed, there would be a Department of Finance determination as to whether or not those parcels could be transferred to the city, and those 3 yellow parcels would be subject to that compensation agreement. And so the other entities that are part of the original compensation agreement would also be part of a compensation agreement for these three pieces as well.
Okay. Go ahead.
And I believe that at some point during the remediation process, the steps the city would need to take would be to begin an amendment to that original compensation agreement to bring in these three parcels. And I believe they would all be approved by the DOF as future development parcels.
Okay, and I see there are staff and city attorney fees at the cost of $5,000. That's apparently for the evaluation that we're going through right now. Is that what that is?
That would be as we get to the end of this situation. That would be doing title searches. That would be just doing administrative things. That would be the amendment to the compensation agreement. All of those costs are reimbursable through the compensation agreement. So even though the city would expend those at the outset, upon development and sale of those parcels, the city would be able to recoup its expenses before the proceeds were divided up amongst the other entities. That frontage piece, that long skinny piece, has particular interest, I would think, because it kind of completes that whole block there. If you'll notice, that middle section, which is part of our compensation agreement now, is somewhat landlocked and only has access on 4th Street and 2nd Street. If the city were to obtain a longer skinny piece along H Street, the city could subdivide that larger parcel into multiple parcels, and it would appear just from the map that it would be more attractive to future buyers in terms of development and probably be worth a little bit more money than it's worth now. So combining those two parcels seems to be something that staff would support, assuming we got a no further action letter from the regional board, and assuming that the title report came out clean as it has on the other parcels.
Okay. And then there are also a set of fees, additional fees that are embodied in here. One estimated fee of $50,000 and another one for $527,000. Are these?
So I think those are cleanup costs that the DLA would incur.
So that the city does not have to incur that.
No, and this is exactly the same process that the DLA went through in putting together the transfers of the other 13 properties. They hired Provost and Pritchard to do the environmental assessment. They hired the contractor to come in and do the cleanup, and they basically directed through the Regional Water Quality Control Board the cleanup, and then ending up with that land use covenant, making the property marketable for anything other than residential uses. So basically the DLA is going through the same process they went through with the other properties. I believe they had these 3 properties sold, which is why they weren't offered to us at the outset. But those sales didn't go through, and so now we have an opportunity to add those to the rest of the parcels that are coming the city's way.
Okay, and just for clarification for me, Bill, who sets the price on these 2 or 3 parcels?
So when we get to the point where we have title, we have, as a staff, been talking about exactly how we're going to market those. We have an obligation to market them at fair market value. And also that would depend on the type of development that would be going in there. And those types of questions and issues are subject to approval by the rest of the entities. So we would basically, once we have the properties in hand, we would get an appraisal as to what their value was in terms of development value. The city would either contract out to market those properties through some other consultant, or we would market them ourselves. But we do have an obligation to the other taxing entities to get fair market value for them.
And the other questions that I have are around issues on the contamination of the property. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer that or if I need to.
Yeah, I think I'll defer to Dave Norman, but I will only indicate to you that piece that has the arsenic issue is very similar to the other pieces that have arsenic issues, and we would assume that we would not take title unless we got a no further action letter from the board to a level that would allow for commercial development. They've been cleaning up all of these pieces to a level that will allow for commercial development as opposed to residential development. So once they achieve that and they get the no further action letter by the board, we're pretty much good to go in terms of either developing them ourselves as a city or selling them and having someone else develop them as an owner of the parcels.
So at this point, could I defer my other questions to whoever can answer it before we move forward?
Sure.
Okay. And again, one of my questions is, what phase are we in right now as far as the property being cleaned up?
I think that's a Dave Norman question, and
Okay.
I don't know if the site assessment has been completed yet, but he can answer to that.
All right.
Good evening, Councilmember Lewis and the rest of the council, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so both of the parcels have been completed assessment. We do know that both parcels do have arsenic affected soils. And again, just for review, the arsenic in this case comes from a long-term use by the railroad, and they used arsenic-based herbicides. And so in many cases, especially in rail trail properties around the country, they have impacted soils with arsenic in them. The parcels that are to the north of 2nd Avenue that have the loading dock and railroad spur happen to be the advantage of having a complete fence around them and complete hardscape, except a very small section north of the little black triangle that Mr. Persico has on his map, where he designates the 0.42, yep, in that zone. So that's the only exposed soil. The rest of the property is complete hardscaped and fenced with a wrought iron style fence. So there's no public access to that property at all. That's why we are recommending on that parcel to go directly to the water board and request a no further action, because there's no exposure potential to the public at that piece of property. The only way you could get exposure there is to remove the asphalt.
And so if that happens, if the property sells and whoever purchases it wants to develop according to the information that's going to be registered with the title, as long as they're not building a resident on it, if they want to build another commercial building, I would assume they would have to remove that concrete. So I guess I'm just trying to determine whether or not there's going to be an issue there if that concrete is removed and only the portion of the exposed property has been tested for arsenic.
So we cored through the asphalt and concrete sections there and took samples. So we have a good understanding what those concentrations are. And when we went to the water board, we would request similar land use covenants that you have already approved on other properties for this property, allowing commercial or industrial, but not residential. There may be, in this case, there may be, depending on the potential use, the soil management plan that went along with this land use covenant would have some slightly different restrictions than on the other parcels already approved, because they would have more remediation done now than later. And if somebody wanted to remove that, not use the loading dock, or completely change the use of that property, there could be some other implications on that parcel. The parcel that is now south of 2nd Avenue, as Mr. Vaughn pointed out, is already continuous to other parcels that the city has accepted. They would be managed in exactly the same way. There would be some removal of soil from that property to the same levels that were met from the other rail trail properties. And it would have a land use covenant also, because we are cleaning them up to the commercial industrial standard. And so that parcel would have that same land use covenant as the other rail trail parcels.
Okay, and just two more questions. In the testing, when you pull the soil, was it just testing for arsenic, or are there a level of different other type of contaminants that are tested when the soil is being tested?
So in these cases, we limit our testing. We did do some other metals, but we do limit the testing to the known contaminant. We did do phase 1s on the property. That was that phase 1 that Mark was talking about. Not to confuse the terms, there's a phase 1, it's the first step, but it also means a real estate transaction study. So it's called a phase 1 environmental assessment. And it's governed by ASTM, a standard that we all abide by. And so we did that phase 1 on all those parcels, so that we understood what were the impacts due to previous land use. There was no information concerning those parcels that would suggest any other land use back to the 1930s that would indicate other contaminants may likely be present. So with all that information together, then we limit what we look for based on that data.
Okay. And then my last question is, are we in phase 2 or are we at phase 3 right now?
So we have completed phase 2, and we are waiting for We've submitted documentation to the DLA with fees and a potential schedule for the actual cleanup pending approval by the DLA, the DOF, and then presumably whether the city's interested in those parcels also.
And the regional water quality board, I would assume they're in on that as well.
They are aware. We have kept them informed the entire time, and as soon as then we're giving the go-ahead by the DLA to pursue that, then we will formally include them with letters and send them the testing results, and then they'll respond to us in like kind with the other parcels that we've done before.
Thank you, Mr. Norman, for your time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
If I just might add, Mrs. Lewis, those are really good questions in terms of the ultimate development and the ultimate value of those pieces. Because of the contamination levels and the special handling that will be required for construction, that could affect the fair market value of the properties to someone who wants to develop them. So that would be coming. So for instance, if that was a clean piece of property with no restrictions in terms of arsenic or anything like that, you would have a different value than what we're going to get from these parcels that are cleaned up just to the standard to allow for commercial industrial use. Even though they're allowed commercial industrial use, there are soil management plan that goes along with that whoever develops those pieces have to follow, so that they're not putting their workers or themselves in danger as they do their construction activities. So I view those as all things that will affect the ultimate value of the property to someone who wants to ultimately develop the property, which is really I don't want to say it's of no concern to the city, but it's really a developer concern in terms of what they would be willing to purchase that property for in light of having to do a little bit extra in terms of getting it ready for their commercial development, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's helped me with the understanding, because certainly I don't want the city to have to sit on to have a financial responsibility to this property in light of the contaminants and the possibility of what the value may be in the long run. But because it does pose a risk to any particular developer who's looking at the property, you know, keeping that in mind. And certainly they're going to keep that in mind in regards to the price if we can sell this property.
True. And so the future development property, we're supposed to be mindful of the redevelopment goals that were set out back when the redevelopment agency was formed, which was to remediate blight and to encourage economic development along the rail trail. And so that doesn't mean squeezing every last dollar out of each of these pieces of property. It means marketing them in a way that will encourage development along that trail in a manner that developers can afford to develop the property. So I think when we enter that phase of this, after the properties are acquired, we will have to give some thought to exactly how the city would like to market those properties and what the plan is. This particular one with that middle skinny piece seemed to me to be extremely attractive to the city because it makes the rest of that piece larger and more accessible to H Street. Not so sure about the piece to the west. It does have hardscape over it, and I'm not sure what the plan could be for that one, but I don't think there's any downside to the city taking title to those properties, assuming they're cleaned up.
And again, I just don't want to see the city have to sit on this for years and years and years. I'm hoping that someone will come along and develop it, but I do realize, you know, with the questions that I've asked, that these properties are not prime, and just because of the contaminant. And
so the alternative to that would be the city somewhat losing control over the development along that trail. And DLA could sell it to anybody who could basically develop whatever commercial development they want, and as long as they meet the minimum codes for that zone, they would be able to develop that property, as opposed to the city having title to the property and somewhat being able to control the type of development along that trail through disposition and development agreements and the way that those properties are marketed. You have much more control over what ultimately is developed on those pieces, which would seem to be a very large benefit to the city, as opposed to the DLA just trying to unload those pieces because they have the same concern as to the carrying cost of those pieces that you have. So yes, we will have to have a very good marketing plan and make those parcels attractive to commercial and industrial development in order for this to be a successful project. So there you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, everyone. So Mr. Vaughn, what, as far as direction on council, would you like to hear a motion as to, and what is exactly you would like us?
I think Mr. Persico is looking for an indication from the council that if they expend this money in doing this cleanup and doing this work that gets the properties ready to transfer, that the city is interested and would accept the transfer to those properties, assuming everything else falls into place. Get the no further action letter. There's nothing on the title that would keep the property from being marketable by the city. I think is that what you're looking for, Mark?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so essentially to continue pursuing this road of getting this property, the cleanup and transfer into Los Banos to the city.
Yeah, because they're looking at spending $500,000 in cleaning up that property, and don't necessarily want to spend that money if the city's not interested in taking title to the property once it's cleaned up.
Okay, and that, once, as you said earlier, is reimbursable, so that that is not a cost to the city ultimately.
Well, it's a cost to the DLA. It doesn't even come into it's not a cost to the city at all.
Okay.
The only cost the city will have is just kind of the admin costs of following along on what's going on, doing our due diligence on the properties once they're cleaned up. And like I said, we would have to amend the compensation agreement to add these 3 properties to it. So that's the only cost that would be at risk to the city.
Okay. So does council, is there any council objection to continuing to pursue this and bring this in? Go ahead, if you'd like to raise your hand. If none, then staff can move ahead with the requested action.
Mr. Mayor, the map is still up. The revised map is still up on the screen. So I don't know if you would be able to see anybody's hand if they want.
Oh, I've got the participant, and the hands will show. Yes.
Yeah.
You bet. Thank you for reminding me. But yes, I have that participant up. So
I can stop sharing my screen, Mr. Mayor.
okay.
Mr. Mayor, and one more request, if you can have the presenters send us, the staff, the updated map, and they can send that to us because it was not in our packet.
Yeah, I apologize for that, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Persico sent that to me, and I didn't get it out to you in time for the meeting, but I can get that to you first thing.
I can share that with them.
Okay.
Okay. So I see no opposition from council. So I guess we can go ahead and pursue and take that as direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council.
Thank you very much. Be nice to see that all wrapped up. That's some nice property we'd like to have control of. Thank you very much. All right. We'll now move on to the COVID-19 status update, and that'll be handled by Acting City Manager Breezy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight I have the privilege of introducing, introducing is the appropriate word because he's a friend of ours, Dr. Philip Yu with Sutter Memorial. He's the administrator and chief medical executive for Sutter Hospital in Los Banos. He was kind enough to come in and provide us a COVID update to show the community and the council what's going on in the Los Banos area at Sutter Hospital. So thank you, Dr. Yu, for coming in tonight to do this presentation. I appreciate it, and I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Breezy. Thank you for having me.
Oops.
Can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to make sure I re-thanked you for inviting me tonight to your meeting. I wanted to just start off by introducing my team. We can go to the next slide. This is the team that you have here at Memorial Hospital Los Banos. You've got Christy Marion as our chief executive, John Campbell in finance, Sean Garcia in HR, Joy Castro in care coordination, Shona Avant, director of quality, and Kirk Craig, our compliance officer. This is your administrative team that runs the hospital on a day-to-day operations basis and has done just an amazing job during this pandemic. We can go to the next slide. Also wanted to share with you a little bit about our mission. And the reason why is because one of the things I always stress is that we are community-based. This hospital is here to serve the community, and that's a huge part of our mission and our vision. Next slide, please. Very importantly, we're here today to demonstrate our values. One of those key values is community. Another one is teamwork. Another one is excellence in quality and compassion and caring. And that's why we're here today. Talk a little bit about COVID. Next slide, please. These are some of the services that we've put together over the many years. And I just wanted to point out a couple of key ones that we're working on or actually have in place. Primary Stroke Center, which takes a tremendous amount of work to do and to have up and operational. And most recently, telepsychiatry, as well as during this time, and it's not on here actually, I just realized, is the EICU, the electronic ICU. So we partner with our within our Sutter Health network to get ICU physicians looking in on our patients in the intensive care unit at all times. Next slide, please. now we'll delve into a little bit about the COVID situation. So I do want to share with you that right now we are in week 5 of the current surge. I also wanted to share that we currently have sufficient PPE, ventilators, medications, and equipment. We've actually been very, very fortunate to be part of a large system, but that's able to get these things, but also that we've been able to keep up on it, so that we have, and I want to say this, we have not had significant shortages of these items at Memorial Hospital Los Banos. Recently, for this surge, we brought on extra staff in the form of traveler nurses to be able to handle it, because we realized 2 things would happen. First, we'd have an influx of patients, which we have. Second, we were going to experience staff shortages because people get sick. We nurses, doctors, everybody else, we still are susceptible to the pandemic as well. Our ED is extremely busy. It is actually at pre-pandemic levels. So we typically see about 90 to 100 patients a day. We're easily doing that. Our rural health clinic is also very busy, and part of the important mission that the rural health clinic serves is to give vaccine doses. So it has continued to give vaccine doses. We have plenty of vaccine on hand to give. Couple things. We are the safety net. As you may know, some of the local primary care physicians, Jason Mevi, Dr. Bemoretti, have retired. That has put more patients sort of into the net, as well as going to our rural health clinic. And as we're fighting this pandemic, none of the other diseases took a break. Actually, because a lot of people had to delay care, we're seeing that consequence right now. Many people are actually got a little bit worse with their diabetes, with their heart failure. I put a couple of illustrations up here. This picture is not our hospital. I just want you to know that I'm protecting HIPAA when I put that picture up there. It's just a generic picture, but it very well could be our hospital. This looks exactly what it looks like in my units today on a regular daily basis. And the picture down below of the burning house with the jogger walking by with the stroller, that's actually a little bit of how we feel right now, because the hospital itself is constantly busy. We have been working extra shifts. A lot of staff are extremely tired. Morale is at times low because we have seen a lot of this pandemic firsthand. You can go to the next slide, please. So that's our current situation. A little bit about COVID in general. So I pulled this up just yesterday. I was actually looking at influenza. But the CDC publishes a influenza, and they also happen on this graph to put in all the COVID deaths as well. And it was shocking for me to see this, because typically I look at it and see influenza mortality. And, you know, when they put the graphs up there, it looks like it's pretty high, right? But when you compare it to the mortality that is related to COVID, influenza looks like a few molehills, while COVID looks like Mount Everest. It is significantly higher, and the number of deaths that are coded to COVID is tremendous in comparison to past years. And just so you understand, you know, what I'm presenting here is that during the winter times, during those months when influenza is at its peak, we see many patients suffer from influenza, pneumonia, and other complications thereof. And since we've had COVID, we've noticed a 4 to 7-fold increase in the number of patients that we have in the intensive care unit, that we have in house to treat these individuals. And it has had a definite wear and tear effect on our staff. And but nevertheless, throughout this pandemic, your hospital and your staff, they're yours, by the way, mine too. They've been, and doctors, nurses, they've been incredibly dedicated to treating our patients and getting through this. But that is a bit of our harsh reality. You may notice the very right-hand side, This one ends at week 30. By the way, we're in week 33, so this is only 2 weeks into the latest surge. Since then, that little bump on the right-hand side has basically doubled in size, maybe tripled at this point. So that's not represented here in this slide, but we are seeing a tremendous number of cases, and it is growing to the equivalence of the December through February peak that you see.
Doctor,
Yes.
It's one of the graphs, the red line graph says percentage of death due to PIC.
Yes.
What is PIC?
Great question. So that is pneumonia, influenza, and COVID. So
Okay.
that is add all three together, and that you get the PIC. So you can see that that red line is above COVID line, right? Because there are, as I mentioned, none of the other diseases decided to take a break. They are starting to roar. They want attention too. They are also starting to roar. We have been in the media focused on COVID. In the hospitals, we have to treat all kinds of diseases. So that is also part of our reality. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. I'm glad you asked, actually. Thank you. Next slide, please. I put this slide in here. This is influenza-like illnesses. We know that there's almost no influenza going around. So basically, most of this is COVID. We are also seeing a resurgence of a couple of other viruses. One of them is well known to children, called respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. That is starting to also take off. But the key here is that over the last few weeks, and you can see into week 30, what's called week 31 of the CDC's graphing, starting somewhere around actually week 10, there was an influx or increase in the number of pediatric influenza-like illness cases. These are almost all due to COVID. You can also see since about week 26, a gradual increase in the 25 to 24, the 25 to 49, basically all age groups have started to climb back up with influenza-like illness. Again, this is not influenza. These are the likely COVID patients displaying symptoms because it is all very similar. But the shocking part for me was that pediatric age group that's been going up. That is the age group, of course, that cannot be immunized at this point. And that's what you would expect. But also the impact that I wanted to point out is that children have now returned to school. We know that every August, September, October, childhood illnesses, infectious diseases go up naturally because children are now commingling, mixing in the school setting, and we should expect that. But that also means that they'll bring it home, and so we're watching for that as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's going on in our county? I know you guys are probably familiar with the public health site. So I'm not going to focus on everything on this graph. I do want to focus on a couple things, the percent of fully vaccinated individuals. And the reason why that is actually a big marker for us in healthcare is because at 34.8, that means about 65 to 66% are not vaccinated. That is the potential for us to see patients. So at a fairly low vaccination rate in the county means that we'll have more cases in the hospital. Vaccines have clearly shown to, number one, reduce the disease. Number two, more importantly, from my selfish perspective, it reduces the risk that somebody will need to be in the emergency room, and subsequently significantly reduces the risk that someone will need to be hospitalized. Currently, you may have heard that the pandemic that we're experiencing, or the surge that we're experiencing now, is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. I will tell you that is exactly true. Of our patients, approximately about 89% that are admitted to the hospital are unvaccinated. Of the 11% that are vaccinated, their disease is much milder. They wind up getting out after a few days. We just want to bring them in, give them some medications, make sure that they don't progress. Of our mortalities, which have suddenly spiked, and I must tell you, they aren't the 75-year-olds anymore. The first go around, we had a lot of 65, 75-year-olds with multiple comorbidities. The average day for me and for our staff is that each week we're coding, we're seeing 2 or 3 45, 39, 52-year-olds who have a lot of life in front of them come in deathly ill and code. By code, I mean die. So that has become our reality, and that's what we are actually seeing in-house on a regular daily basis. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about the Delta variant. So, I don't know if you've had Dr. Sandoval or one of the other, Dr. Nyanjo Kempa at your meetings here. But I like to do a little bit of just education on the Delta variant. Now, in order to get a Greek letter, you have to rise to the level of concern to the CDC. Before you get the Greek letter, you'll be just called like C-1-2-3 or something like that. Once you get a Greek letter, that means you're a pretty dangerous player. So the Delta variant, its ability to spread is expressed in a number called the R0. Which means that if one person gets Delta, how many people will they spread it to? The Delta variant has an R0 of about 5. The Alpha variant had an R0 somewhere between 2.3 and 3.2. So we'll just round it around to 3. So the Delta variant basically is almost twice as infectious as the Alpha variant. And just remember that the Delta variant has an R0 of 5, even though a huge amount of the population is vaccinated in the United States. So that tells you that if we were unvaccinated dealing with the Delta variant, it would probably have a R0 that is somewhere in the range of 7 to 10. Just to give you a sort of a frame of reference, influenza has an R0 of 1.3 each year. Measles has an R0 of 18. It is one of the most infectious diseases you can have out there as far as measles go, or as far as infections go. So Delta also does a couple other things. It doubles the risk for hospitalization in an unvaccinated population, and it appears to cause more severe illness. And that is borne out by in the observational studies thus far. That is also borne out by my personal witnessing across 2 hospitals that I serve. I forgot to mention, and I'll talk about it afterwards, what kind of medicine I do in particular. The last thing is that fully vaccinated people with the Delta variant can still spread the virus. But number one, if you're vaccinated, you tend to get a much milder illness. And you also tend to spread the virus for a much shorter time. The Delta variant compared to the Alpha variant, the Delta variant produces about 1,000 times more copies than the Alpha variant, pound for pound. So, which makes sense. That's why it's so much more infectious. So these are some of the realities of the Delta variant. Up in the upper right-hand corner, I included the map of where the largest concentration of COVID cases are today throughout the United States. You can see that the Central Valley is purple. You can see most of the south east is purple. Purple being, of course, a much higher concentration. For whatever reason, I don't know why, maybe Nebraska just doesn't report. Nebraska, which sits right smack dab in the middle, is gray. they must have some issue with reporting their statistics. But otherwise, the rest of the nation sits somewhere between the yellow, red, and purple. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is getting to the end here. A race toward herd immunity, as you may have heard, that vaccination produces something called herd immunity, meaning that the more people are vaccinated, we start acting as a shield for others who are unvaccinated. I included this slide because at one point we were on a pace to reach herd immunity somewhere in July of this year. We've dramatically fallen off that pace and are projected to reach herd immunity somewhere around February to April of 2022. And that's what this is saying. And it does not include children who are 12 years or younger because they're not eligible for the vaccine. This is just herd immunity in the 12 years and older population. Next slide, please. So thank you for allowing me to talk a little bit about what we're going through, what's happening in our local area. I wanted to make sure that I left time for questions because it's important to know what's on your mind and what is concerning you and how we are addressing that as the medical community.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll go through council, see if anyone has questions or comments. Mr. Jones?
No questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
No questions here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Ms. Lewis?
Just a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. Dr. you gave the mortality rate range, people 43, 39, 52 age groups that we didn't see with the original COVID-19. Based on those numbers, our age factors, how many people generally are coming through the hospital daily that you're seeing that have COVID? And I don't know if it's on a daily basis that you guys count or a weekly or monthly basis, but what is the morbidity rate here in Los Banos for the Delta variant?
Great question. So on any given day, we see, like as I mentioned, about 90 to 100 total patients, right? Obviously not all are COVID. Approximately 40 will screen in as possible COVID. We'll test about 30 each day. Some of them don't get tested, or some of them have send out tests, and we're picking up a positivity rate anywhere between 13 and 20%. So a number of individuals, by the way, will come in, they just want to get tested. So they will say, I've got a sniffle or something like that, and we'll test them. So we expect that. But of those individuals that are quite ill or clearly displaying respiratory symptoms, I would say, so again, when we look at every test that we run, lately it's been between 13 and 20% over the last few weeks. When we look at just those individuals that we think are very high risk, it's probably about 50% of them are testing positive. Now, you asked me about mortality rate of the Delta variant. We don't actually track the Delta variant. We know from public health that when they sequence it right now, about 90% are the Delta variant. So we assume that most of our hospitalizations are currently the Delta variant. And right now, I would not be able to tell you the mortality rate exactly. I can, because we don't, count everybody who had COVID, but I can give you a hard number. I think we're at 56 mortalities for the pandemic. And I'm going to tell you, in the last 5 weeks, we've had probably about 14 of them. So a significant number of individuals who have succumbed to the disease. And again, a much, much younger age range than we expect to see.
Okay, so the 56 deaths that you're speaking of, is that since COVID started, or is that
Yes.
since the Delta? Okay.
Yeah, that is since COVID started. And we do track that. I apologize, I don't remember offhand the denominator, like how many patients have we admitted to the hospital. We track that as well. So I'll get back to you on that, Ms. Lewis.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Yamas, any questions, comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor, for coming in. Appreciate the information. Had a question and some comments for you. You stated at the beginning of your presentation that you're seeing folks with diabetes, heart disease, and other issues, which have their conditions have gotten worse. And I would assume that by getting worse, that has accepted their ability to fight these diseases or COVID. And what percentage would have possibly survived had we not isolated them and had they gotten their treatment, gotten diagnosed? So did this increase the mortality rate because of our actions, or could that have been avoided, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, Mr. Lamas, first off, as you may know, last year during the early part of the pandemic, this city council decided to require masking and social distancing. And that, I will tell you, had a huge positive impact on the community. And your police officers, I know, actually enforced it, because I tried to walk into Target one day and saw them talking with somebody and telling them to put on their mask. It had a huge impact in improving and slowing the disease so that it did not get overwhelmed. I want to make sure that you guys understand the impact that it had. We fully expected to be completely overwhelmed early on in the pandemic. You know, as time has gone by, though, you're right, because a lot of the patients chose, it was difficult to get in to see their doctor, right? You had to do a virtual visit. Some people did not have, we noticed, the capabilities to, or the internet access to do virtual visits. And there were so many, restrictions on getting into care. The other part was that a lot of people chose to delay care because the fear of contracting COVID from going out or seeing your doctor had significant impacts. So a lot of patients simply did not get the regular care that they normally have. I will tell you that on a patient by patient basis, for instance, I have had a couple of patients who delayed their chemotherapy, their cancer care, because they didn't want to go out there and contract COVID, or and they didn't feel comfortable interacting with their physicians. And now that has meant that their cancer has progressed further along, probably faster than they would have otherwise anticipated. Diabetes, because we haven't been out there doing our regular thing, a lot of people have gained significant amounts of weight, which has made their diabetes worse, their heart worse. So these are the effects of the untold effects of a pandemic, that it leads us down these other roads and causes other things to sort of fester and then finally get worse. And we're seeing the after effects of that in the hospital as well. I hope that answered your question.
So then you would agree that their declining health, or probably not, increases the susceptibility and death to the coronavirus.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, your immune system is not nearly as strong, especially with, by the way, especially with diabetes. We've noted a huge association with diabetes and coronavirus. And this community, diabetes is a huge issue. And so and it remains one of our focuses.
Now, from what I understand is that well, if you could tell me, what is the survivability for a person who contracts the coronavirus?
You know, it's actually, I'm going to say that it's, you know, your risk of dying if you get coronavirus across all age groups winds up being somewhere around the 2 to 3%, right? So you may say, wow, that's pretty low. But if you were to take 2 or 3% of Los Banos, right? So 42,000 residents times 2%. What is that? Sorry, I'm not that great at math. But that's basically 1,000 people. That's 1,000 people.
Well, we've only had 56 though.
If we have 50, right. So the things that we're doing.
We can't, you're projecting something that we have data that doesn't support your projection.
No, it's 2% of who get coronavirus, right? Okay. So it's not 2% of the population, but if everybody winds up getting coronavirus, it could rise to that level.
Well, how many of the cases are asymptomatic?
Of the Delta virus, I don't remember that statistic off the top of my head.
Is there a great percentage of folks who get the virus asymptomatic?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to tell because I think you have to do what's called surveillance testing to know if an asymptomatic person has coronavirus.
So we don't have that data.
I don't have that. I don't have that data. Somebody else might have that data. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Last comment or question is that you said that, 39, 49, 52-year-olds, you said that they were coding on a daily basis and dying on a daily basis. Is that accurate?
Weekly. I said weekly.
Weekly. Okay.
Week 5 surge.
I guess I appreciate your presentation, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions and suppositions. And I think that, again, good health, good eating habits, exercising, and doing those things that you're recommending, washing hands, maybe staying away from folks, I think will go a long way to preserving health. But again, thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Llamas. And thank you, Doctor, for the presentation. This is a disease unlike any we've ever faced. It's confusing and dangerous at the same time. And we appreciate your visit. And anything else you'd like to add before this evening?
No, I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to come in and present our what's going on. But I also wanted to reassure the City Council as well as our citizens. We are actively in this fight for them. And our staff, one of our nurses said today, being in healthcare is one of the most rewarding things during this pandemic, is one of the most rewarding things she has ever done. We feel like we've made a huge difference in our community and lives of our patients. And we're going to continue to do that for our community and our patients. So I want to thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Breezy?
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank Dr. Yu for the presentation, all the staff at the hospital. Some public safety see the men and women at the hospital and the ED doing their jobs on a daily basis. A lot of unsung heroes there, and we appreciate their assistance in keeping our community safe and healthy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. At that, we will close item 8, move to item 9, advisement to public notices. We have one report, and for that, we go to Community and Economic Development Director Elms.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have one report. This is for a conditional use permit to allow the operation of a hair salon out of a private residential unit at 1045 Harrison Avenue. The applicant is proposing restricted times and part-time and low impact to the neighborhood, which would be conditioned to ensure no adverse effects to the neighborhood. This public hearing will be held on Wednesday, September 8th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Virtually using Zoom. The link will be provided on the Planning Commission's agenda, which will be posted this Friday. So any questions can be emailed, or public comment can be provided to planningcommission@losvegas.org. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. Now we will go on to the city manager's report. Acting City Manager Breezy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. No report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Breezy. I have MCAG and Peninsula Clean Energy and Measure V. MCAG, they have a fun, interesting program. They pay shepherds to have the sheep come graze properties they own to keep the grass down, and seems to be working very well, keeping that fire hazard away. I also meant there's the program, it's a regional program, it's called the REAP 2 program, our regional action grants, and those are going to be available through, from what I understand, available through the COG to the cities has to do with housing, helping cities deal with housing challenges. One of the goals is to get highway miles off, among other things. You can go to the website, CalCog discusses that, and you can just find that, look up REAP2, REAP2, and that's a program coming. That also includes some funding from the ARPA. And then also discussed at MCAG was that Pioneer Ortigalita signalization, and also the synchronizing of the lights on Pacheco Boulevard. Peninsula Clean Energy is once again looking for the community outreach professional. The person we had on resigned, and so I believe the position is still open. And so you can go to Peninsula Clean Energy, join our team, and look that up to see if you would be interested in that position, or anyone you know looking for someone who can get excited about connecting people up with the programs. Nothing particular on Measure V, as that's closely tied to MCAG with the highways. So at that, we'll go to our city council member reports. Mr. Jones.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert.
No report here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of reports. This past Thursday, the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District was in Los Banos, and they had promotions on our radio station, information through our city website in regards to how to replace your vehicle. And when I went by to visit, there were, I think, roughly about 6 or 7 people who had signed up for replacement of their vehicles. One resident in town, they didn't give me the name or anything, but just shared the experience that her car was in such horrible shape that she even doubted that she can get it to the Fresno area to trade it in for another vehicle. But they were willing to assist her to do that, and the incentives were quite healthy to help people purchase new vehicles. And of course, they would either be electric or a hybrid type vehicle. So I was really pleased to know that they came and reached out to our community, and there were people who signed up for either help of purchasing a new vehicle or a used vehicle. And these incentives are still out there for other residents in Los Banos who need help getting rid of a vehicle that isn't running well, can't be repaired, to purchase a new vehicle. So I want to thank them for coming out to Los Banos, and they will be reaching out again. That was on a positive note. In my opinion, on maybe what would be a sad note for me is yesterday, SB 9 and SB 10 did pass in the California Senate, despite all of the oppositions from multiple cities within the state of California. the California League of Cities also was in opposition of that bill. And California's largest city, Los Angeles, the president, or I guess the mayor of that council, indicated that they voted a 11-1 in opposition of SB 9, and they voted 11-2 in opposition of SB 10. The state legislators and the lobbyists pushed this forward, and it passed the Senate, and it sits on the governor's desk to be signed as we sit here today. So we'll see whether or not the governor has the courage to sign this bill. I hope he doesn't, because what it does is it takes away the autonomy of cities to determine how they want to build out their R1 districts in any one particular community. So it was definitely a large overreach by the state of California legislators to pass this bill and take away the privilege of cities to have the opportunity to determine how they want to build their cities at. And I would like to request to bring back, we had a shopping cart sanitation ordinance that we passed, I believe it was, can't remember if it was this year or last year, I can't remember at this point. But I've not seen any activity in our community by any of our large box stores, our grocery stores, where shopping carts are being sanitized per the ordinance. And I know that it was set up to be done on an honor system where they were to do their own scheduling for the shopping cart sanitizing, but I don't think that this is happening. And so I would like to bring it back to make an adjustment to that ordinance where the businesses that have shopping carts have to develop a schedule, and that they have to give that schedule to the city of Los Banos, because there's no way that we can monitor it to make sure that the shopping carts are clean and sanitized for the customers who go in the store, not just by wiping them down with Lysol wipes or anything like that, or a spray bottle, but the ordinance specifically stated that they were to hire a professional shopping cart cleaning service to sanitize those carts on a monthly basis. So I would like to make a council member request to bring that back so that we can make that adjustment to the ordinance to guarantee that our citizens in Los Banos are going to be safe as much as possible with the shopping carts being sanitized on in a professional manner. And in light of what Dr. Yu has shared with us this evening, I think it was brought out when the ordinance originally was brought before council about the multiple forms of bacteria that can be found on a shopping cart. So I would like to see the city of Los Banos make sure that its citizens are as safe as possible by bringing this back and requiring that the businesses provide a schedule to the city of Los Banos so that we can make sure those schedules are adhered to. And that's my request this evening and my report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Llamas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two items. One, first of all, the tragic death of our servicemen, servicewomen in Afghanistan due to that terrorist attack. Let's not forget that, and that there's still bad people in this world. And that leads me into the second question as to if folks don't have an emergency plan to deal with this kind of terrorist threat, emergency plan, get out of Dodge bag, what have you. Sit down with your family and talk about these things. What would you do in case of, so that you're not having to do it. For God forbid that ever does happen. But it's always best to plan for these things in advance. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Our hearts go out. A great deal of pain with that Afghanistan situation. We have also fires, running rampant in California. Los Banos has sent units and help up to there. Mr. Chief Hurley, could you let us know, do we have anybody up in fighting the wildfires right now from Los Banos? Who's up there?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. We do have crews out. We had a crew that has been at the Caldor fire. They were replaced yesterday with a second crew. They were assigned for the 14-day commitment, and after the 14-day, that task force was swapped out with new crews. The equipment stayed in place, and so we do have a crew back up. They are on call, on duty today, assigned to the incident.
Thank you, Chief. Please let them know our prayers and support are with them. Very dangerous and tiring work. Also, I understand, you bet. I understand both fire and police are selling cancer awareness T-shirts. Is that right? And so, Ms. Maloney, would she be the person to contact, or should people contact the fire department or the police department in order to purchase those T-shirts?
For the police department, they would contact the police department, and for the fire department, contact the fire department.
Okay, so if you want to buy a cancer awareness T-shirt, it's breast cancer, is that correct? Breast cancer. Yes.
Cancer awareness. Cancer awareness.
It's just straight cancer, all cancer awareness. Okay, very good.
Definitely regarding
fire. It's a good cause. Get a chance to want to buy a T-shirt and help that cause out. Both fire and police are providing those this year. So Los Banos is always doing good things, doing all the good we can for all the people we can. We appreciate it, everyone. So now we are going to go into closed session, and we have two items. The first one is conference legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9, one potential case. Item B is conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated representatives: acting city manager Breezy, city attorney Vaughn, city clerk, human resources director Maloney, finance director Williams, legal counsel TUFO, employee organization Los Banos Police Officers Association. And we will come, after closed session, we will come out and report. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Mayor, I think there was a second closed session.
I think I read them both.
Did you read them both? Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Vaughn.
So just give me a minute to go stop the meeting recording.
All right. Regards to Sacramento.
Okay.
All right, everyone, we've come out of closed session. And for both items, we have no reportable action. So Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, Councilmember Lambert, make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Do I have a second?
Mayor, Yamas here, I'll second it.
Thank you. I have a motion by Councilmember Lambert and a second by Councilmember Yamas to adjourn the meeting. Roll call, Ms. Maloney.
She's not here, but I'll do it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't have the order. Please forgive me. Lambert.
That's okay.
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Yamas.
Yes.
Faria.
Yes. Meeting adjourned at 9:27 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.